One was caught by a floppy disk he mailed to a TV station himself.
I was born in '78. He has said himself that he just got busy, like raising kids and having a family. So it was extremely out of the characteristic of my father to be physically abusive.
One by a drinking straw he threw in the trash.
A 34-year-old cold case cracked. Today, this man from Apopka was arrested for allegedly murdering a woman back in 1991.
And police credit DNA technology.
One was assigned for a while to help hunt himself.
Truly sorry to everyone I've hurt. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir.
5 cold cases. 5 men who were never on the run. Not one of them had to be. This is Darkest Crimes. In September of 2025, investigators in New Hampshire finally confirmed the identity of a little girl. She had been sitting inside a rusted steel drum in the woods for 40 years. Her killer was already dead. Had been dead since 2010, but that's not the detail that made the investigators in that room go quiet. What made them go quiet was whose daughter she turned out to be.
Ria was just a child when she was murdered. She deserved to be known, and today we return her name to her.
We had 4 victims of murder, and we were only able to release pictures of what we thought they looked like. We were able to release to you the radioisotope testing that had been done on their bones and teeth showing where they had been.
This is the case of the Brook Barrels. A killer who used at least 6 different names to hide in plain sight for over 3 decades. And a final twist that didn't surface until barely months before this video was made.
Investigators have identified the final victim in a murder case that's haunted detectives for decades. It all began with the discovery of bodies buried in barrels in Allenstown.
The last of 4 victims in a New Hampshire murder case have been identified 40 years after their bodies were discovered.
Back in 1985, the remains of a woman and a girl were found in a barrel in Bear Brook State Park.
November 10th, 1985. Bear Brook State Park, Allenstown, New Hampshire. A hunter walking through the underbrush found a heavy steel drum, half buried, wedged against the tree line. He thought he'd found a dead animal. He hadn't. Inside were the skeletal remains of a woman and a young girl, wrapped tightly in plastic. Investigators believed the deaths had happened years earlier, sometime in the late 1970s or early 1980s. No identification, no missing persons match. Nothing. The case went cold almost instantly. A small New Hampshire cemetery buried them under a headstone that read only, "Known only to God." 15 years later, in May of 2000, an investigator revisiting that same stretch of woods found a second barrel, just yards from the first. Inside, the remains of 2 more young girls. Roughly 2 and 8 years old. 4 victims. 1 killer. 0 names. For the next 17 years, the Bear Brook 4 sat as one of America's most haunting unsolved mysteries.
Right now, the search for a name of the remaining unidentified Bear Brook murder victim is leading to Mississippi.
I took my flashlight and looked in, and you could see there was something white inside the plastic bag, so I peeled back a little of the plastic bag, and that's when you could see that there was bones in there.
Now we know who the killer is. We're hoping that leads us to the identity of the victims and location of other victims in this case.
4 people erased so completely that not even their own families knew to come looking here. The break didn't come from a confession. It didn't come from a fingerprint. It came from a genealogy website. In 2017, investigators traced an old Ancestry.com post from estranged relatives searching for their missing father. The DNA led them to a man named Rader Rasmussen, a convicted killer already sitting in a prison file somewhere in America under completely different names. Bob Evans, Curtis Kimball, Larry Vanner, Gordon Jensen. Nobody realized he was the same man wanted for 4 unsolved murders 3,000 miles away. Here's where it gets darker. Under the alias Gordon Jensen, Rasmussen had once abandoned a little girl at a California campground. 1986. An elderly couple took her in. She later told them he had abused her. For decades, she was known only as Lisa. Nobody knew her real family. In 2016, genetic genealogist Barbara Ray Venter finally traced her back to a woman named Denise Baudin, a young mother who vanished from Manchester, New Hampshire in 1981. Presumed to be yet another Rasmussen victim, her body has never been found. Then in 2019, 3 of the 4 bodies in the barrels were finally named: Marlies Honeychurch and her daughters, Marie and Sarah, a family Rasmussen had moved in with in California back in 1978, right before they disappeared for good. That left one final, nameless child. Investigators simply called her the middle child.
This final victim, known as the middle child, went unidentified for almost 25 years after her remains were found in a barrel at Beaverbrook State Park in Allenstown.
Authorities in New Hampshire now believe they have positively identified the final victim in an infamous cold case known as the Bear Brook murders.
For 6 more years, she stayed unidentified. Then in 2025, the New Hampshire Cold Case Unit partnered with the DNA Doe Project and built out a family tree stretching back to the 1870s. It led them to a woman named Pepper Reed, last seen pregnant in Texas in 1975, before vanishing completely. Within 30 minutes of finding her name, investigators found her daughter's birth record. Rhea Rasmussen, born 1976. The middle child wasn't a stranger's daughter. She was his own.
Rhea will no longer be known only as the middle child. After more than 40 years, her family will have answers to the questions that they have sought for so long. Our work is not done. We will not stop until we have located the whereabouts of Rhea's mother, Pepper, as well as Denise Baudin, who are both suspected to be victims of Terry Rasmussen.
First and foremost, we want to express that Pepper is deeply loved and missed every single day. Though we did not have an opportunity to meet Rhea, she is cherished just as much in our hearts. Our family kindly asks for privacy as we grieve. Lastly, to Chris Alphick, Justin Rowe, Amy Cerullo, Chris Knowles, and the New Hampshire Police Department's DNA Doe Project, and the countless good-hearted people who have assisted in this investigation, we are forever grateful.
Terry Rasmussen had murdered his biological daughter and dumped her beside a family that wasn't even his. Hiding her identity so completely, it took 40 years and a genetic family tree of roughly 25,000 names to finally bring her home. Rasmussen himself was never charged with any of it. He had already been locked away since 2002 for murdering his girlfriend, Yoon Soon Jun, in California under yet another fake name. He died in prison in 2010, 7 years before investigators even learned his real identity. The man responsible for one of the most infamous cold cases in American history never once stood trial for it. And Rhea's mother, Pepper Reed, still missing, still presumed dead, still to this day unaccounted for.
Every time we learn something new, it fills in a piece of that puzzle and fills in a gap of time. It'll hopefully direct us to where he was. It's highly unlikely that he stopped doing what he was doing.
In 1975, a burglar was terrorizing Visalia, California. Police built a task force to catch him, and one of the officers assigned to help hunt him down was the burglar himself.
A teenage girl was raped today in her home in Contra Costa County, and though officials are not saying it was the work of the East Area rapist, they do say the crime was committed in his style.
She was bound. He raped her. He didn't bother anyone else in the residence, and the young girl's father and older sister were inside the residence at the time, were unaware of the attack.
Sure, I can tell you that he is an ex-officer, a police officer in 2 different agencies. One in the Exeter Police Department, which is down in Visalia from approximately 1973 to 1976. Got a job with the Auburn Police Department and was employed there from roughly 1976 to 1979 until he was fired for what you just heard.
For 12 years, that same man terrorized the entire state of California as a rapist, a burglar, and finally, a killer, operating under at least 3 different task force nicknames, because for decades, nobody realized they were all hunting the same person. And for 6 of those years, while he was doing it, he wore a badge. This is the case of the Golden State Killer.
That bombshell arrest, that former police officer who authorities say went on a reign of terror for so many years. The numbers, as I mentioned, are simply staggering. At least 12 murders, 45 rapes.
None of the people who live around here can believe that the man investigators believe is the East Area rapist or the Golden State Killer lived right there in that home where detectives and the FBI are still investigating.
We were able to get some discarded DNA, and we were able to confirm what we thought we already knew.
It wasn't cracked until 2018, 32 years after his final known murder. Beginning in June of 1976, a masked intruder began breaking into homes across Sacramento County. He bound his victims. He raped them at knife point while their families slept in the next room. Investigators called him the East Area Rapist. Then the attacks turned lethal. As they spread south to Ventura, Orange County, Santa Barbara, a new task force gave the killer a new name, the original Night Stalker. By the time it was over, he was linked to at least 13 murders, roughly 50 rapes, and over 100 burglaries stretching across a dozen counties. And for years, nobody even realized the rapist terrorizing the north and the killer stalking the south were the exact same man.
It's despicable. It's immature. It's disgusting. How can his employer not be held responsible for him, for what he did to me and what he did to all these people? He's a public servant. I'm paying for it. I being the public.
I was 22 years old. He went to the kitchen, he started drinking beer. Then he came back. He had a knife in his hand. He decided to rape me and had the knife to my throat and saying if I made any sound or screamed or moved, I would be killed.
The man doing this was, for part of that decade, a sworn police officer. Joseph James DeAngelo served on the Exeter Police Department starting in 1973, then transferred to Auburn PD in 1976. In one almost unbelievable detail confirmed by investigators, DeAngelo personally assisted in the search for a burglar terrorizing Visalia, California, a case later revealed to be his own crime spree. He was, quite literally, helping hunt himself.
The answer was and always was going to be in the DNA. We were looking for a needle in a haystack, but we also all knew that the needle was there.
In 1979, his career ended abruptly. He was fired from the Auburn police force after being caught shoplifting a hammer and a can of dog repellent from a drugstore. The man who would go on to be called one of the most prolific serial offenders in American history walked away from law enforcement over a $5 theft and simply vanished back into ordinary life. For over 20 years, detectives in two separate parts of California ran two separate investigations without knowing they were chasing the same man. Families of victims, like Bruce Harrington, whose brother and sister-in-law were murdered in 1980, spent decades personally lobbying police departments and lawmakers just to get old evidence retested. It wasn't until 2001 that DNA testing finally connected the East Area Rapist crimes to the original Night Stalker murders, proving one person had committed a documented crime wave stretching 12 years and hundreds of miles. The break finally came from a free public genealogy website called GED Match. On April 18, 2018, detectives secretly collected DNA from the door handle of a car. It matched. 6 days later, on April the 24th, 2018, investigators arrested 72-year-old Joseph James DeAngelo in his own driveway in the very same neighborhood where his first known rape victim had lived.
This man is believed to have killed a dozen people and raped nearly 50 women throughout the state. 4 of the murders happened in Orange County. Now authorities in Sacramento believe they have the suspect in custody.
Big break in a decades-old serial killer case out in California. Police say they've now arrested the man known as the Golden State Killer.
By then, DeAngelo was a retired mechanic, a grandfather, a divorced father of 3, living so quietly that neighbors described him as unremarkable. Because the statute of limitations had expired on his 1970s rapes, prosecutors couldn't charge him for most of them. But as part of a plea deal that spared him the death penalty, he was forced to do the one thing 44 years of silence had never pulled out of him: On June 29, 2020, DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder. He was sentenced that August to consecutive life terms without any chance of parole, closing a case that had haunted California for 44 years. 3 states, 3 crime scenes, 1 dead man in a hotel room. For 41 years, police thought his killer had vanished into thin air. He hadn't. He'd been living 2 hours up the road the entire time. This is the case of John Warren.
More than 40 years after a cold case in Warren County, a Columbus man has now been indicted for murder. In 1985, a man was found dead inside a Southwest Ohio hotel room while on a business trip.
A man appears in a Warren County courtroom today after he's arrested in a 40-year-old cold case murder. In October of 1985, John Warren was found dead in his hotel room at a Holiday Inn in Middletown.
It's October 16, 1985. John Christopher Warren, a traveling salesman for an auto parts company, checks into the Holiday Inn in Middletown, Ohio. The following morning, he's found dead inside his hotel room. Investigators quickly determined this wasn't a simple crime of passion. It was brutal. Prosecutors would later call it a case involving extreme violence. His killer didn't just murder him, they robbed him. And then the trail starts stretching across the map. Days later, nearly 400 miles away, police in Dalton, Georgia, discover some of Warren's stolen property discarded behind a Cracker Barrel restaurant. Meanwhile, Warren's Oldsmobile turns up almost 1,000 miles from Ohio. Abandoned in Reddington Beach, detectives in 1985 chase every lead they can. But without the forensic technology of today, none of it sticks. The case goes cold for over 3 decades. Then, in 2019, Warren County Sheriff's Office detectives quietly reopen the file. They pull the old evidence from all 3 scenes: the hotel room, the items behind the Cracker Barrel, the abandoned Oldsmobile, and resubmit everything for modern forensic testing. It works. Investigators zero in on 2 names, Randy McAllister and a second man, a suspected accomplice who, by this point, has already died. McAllister wasn't a ghost. He wasn't off the grid. Prosecutors say he'd effectively been on the run for nearly 41 years. Yet he was living openly in Columbus, Ohio, just a couple of hours from where he allegedly beat a man to death and stole his car. McAllister already had 3 prior violent felony convictions on his record. Somehow, for 4 decades, none of it connected back to a murder in a Middletown hotel room. In June 2026, Warren County prosecutors finally brought their case to a grand jury. The jury agreed there was enough evidence and indicted 62-year-old Randy Lane McAllister on charges of aggravated murder and murder. Cold case investigations are cold for a reason, Warren County prosecutor David Fornshell said. McAllister made his first court appearance before a Warren County judge this month. He's being held on a $500,000 bond and faces 20 years to life without parole, if convicted.
A man accused in a Warren County cold case murder that went unsolved for more than 4 decades was in court for the first time today.
An indictment has been filed charging you with count 1 aggravated murder.
Case involving extreme violence. The victim was killed. He was beaten to death and strangled with the ligature.
41 years, 3 states, 1 quiet life in Columbus that nobody thought to question. For 34 years, the man who killed her lived less than 2 miles from where she was last seen alive.
A 34-year-old cold case cracked. Today, this man from Apopka was arrested for allegedly murdering a woman back in 1991.
This is the area off of Neptune Road in St. Cloud where investigators say Julia Sue Wilbanks was discovered. Law enforcement says her body was stabbed more than a dozen times.
He wasn't hiding. He was waving at his neighbors. He worked. He built an ordinary life. Neighbors would later call him a nice guy. Nobody had any idea what they were describing. This is the case of Julia Sue Wilbanks and the single discarded drinking straw that finally ended a 3-decade nightmare.
There's a reason why we're here talking to you today, okay? Your blood was on her.
I don't know what you want me to say. I know nothing about this.
I can't imagine how this has weighed on you for 33 years. That pressure and always having that in the back of your mind, knowing what happened.
I don't know. I don't know that it was. You're telling me it was, but if I wasn't there, how's my blood get there? I don't have amends to make here. I don't know her. I didn't do it.
It's September 23rd, 1991 in St. Cloud, Osceola County, Florida. A group of motorists driving along Neptune Road near Parton Triangle Park notice something in the thick grass off the shoulder. What they find is a young woman's body. She's identified as Julia Sue Wilbanks, 27 years old, a single mother. Investigators determined she had been stabbed approximately 17 times with fatal wounds to her heart. Detectives interview witnesses, collect physical evidence. They even run DNA analysis. But forensic science at the time simply isn't powerful enough. No suspect is ever named. The case goes cold.
You know, cold cases are never forgotten. They're constantly reevaluated. From time to time, we constantly reevaluate this. DNA profiles are constantly uploaded into systems, and we're compared against what's out there currently. And this one actually, by the grace of God, we got a match. Bad guys beware, I'll tell you that.
In 2012, investigators reopened the file. DNA recovered from blood on Wilbanks' clothing is uploaded to a national public database, hoping for a match. Still, nothing. The trail goes quiet again. Fast forward to early 2025. St. Cloud police resubmit the old evidence, this time to DNA Labs International. It doesn't just check a suspect against a database. It takes DNA left at a decades-old crime scene, builds out a family tree from public genealogy records. In March, they get a hit. Investigators say the DNA profile is roughly 1.9 trillion times more likely to belong to one specific man than to anyone unrelated to him. His name, Gene Stuller, 72 years old, living quietly in Apopka, Florida. Stuller wasn't a drifter, and he wasn't a stranger passing through town. Investigators say he had been living less than 2 miles from Wilbanks' last known address in Kissimmee. For 34 years, the man accused of stabbing her 17 times had simply stayed close. But genetic genealogy alone can't put handcuffs on someone. Police needed his DNA, fresh and voluntarily discarded. Detectives quietly surveilled Stuller until he discarded something ordinary, a drinking straw. That single piece of trash was enough. Lab results confirmed it. A match to the DNA left behind at the murder scene in 1991. On April 21st, 2025, just 2 days before his 73rd birthday, Gene Stuller was arrested near his Apopka home with help from the Orange County Sheriff's Fugitive Unit.
First tonight, a man is now in jail in connection to a woman's death in Osceola County more than 3 decades ago.
The body of 27-year-old Julia Sue Wilbanks was found here on the side of Neptune Road back in September of 1991.
Depressing to me. I like the guy. He's always been a good guy, and I'm going to miss him.
He was charged with second-degree murder and disturbing a dead body. St. Cloud Police Chief Douglas Girk stood before cameras and delivered a message 3 decades in the making. Cold cases are never forgotten. As of now, Stuller's case remains before the court, and under the law, he is presumed innocent unless and until proven guilty at trial. But for Julia Sue Wilbanks' family, after 33 years of silence, a name finally exists where there was once only a question mark. It's a chilling reminder. Sometimes the person you'd least suspect isn't hiding in the shadows at all. In one of his final taunting letters, BTK asked Wichita police a very specific question. Could they trace him if he used a floppy disk? Police answered him through a classified ad. In the newspaper, they told him it was safe. What they told him and what was actually true were 2 very different things. This is the case of BTK.
Dennis Rader was a vicious killer who led a double life. To most, Rader appeared to be a family man and a pillar of his community. He was a Boy Scout leader and an active member of his church. He also murdered 10 people, including 2 children.
Convicted serial killer Dennis Rader, the Kansas man known as the BTK killer, is serving life in prison for killing 10 people.
I don't know how to exactly say that. I had many, what I call them projects. They were different people in the town that I followed, watched. Kevin would probably be dead today. I'm not bragging on that, it's just a matter of fact. Nancy Fox was another one of the projects. When I was trolling the area, I noticed her go in the house one night. I confronted her, told her there I had a problem, sexual problem, that I would have to tie her up.
The serial killer who taunted an entire city for 31 years and whose downfall came down to a single deleted file on a purple floppy disk. On January 15th, 1974, in Wichita, Kansas, a man broke into the home of the Otero family and murdered 4 of them, parents Joseph and Julie, and 2 of their children, Josephine and Joseph Jr. Months later, he wrote a taunting letter to police describing his method in 3 chilling words: bind them, torture them, kill them. He gave himself the name BTK. Over the next 17 years, he murdered at least 10 people around Wichita, all while sending police and reporters letters, poems, word puzzles, and even a doll staged to resemble one of his victims. After his last known murder in 1991, BTK simply vanished. No letters, no packages, no bodies. For over a decade, Wichita believed he was dead, locked up for something else, or had simply lost his taste for it. An entire generation of Wichita kids grew up never having lived through the terror their parents still whispered about. The case sat cold.
We're standing there talking, and this guy comes out of the neighboring office space. And he starts talking to us. He's asking us whether emails can be tracked and how to trace emails. Customer-oriented, so we want to be very helpful. So we explained all the details about how, if you send us an email, that we're going to track it down. And we look at the headers. We all do all this kind of stuff and email on behalf of BTK whether we'd be able to track him. So we assured him under no uncertain terms that, yes, we would find him if he sent us an email.
There's a knock on my door, and he said he was the FBI. And then he says, your dad has been arrested as BTK. It's extremely out of the characteristic of my father to be physically abusive.
In January 2004, the Wichita Eagle ran a story marking the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders. Rader later admitted he read it and, in his own words, was kind of bored. 2 months later, the newspaper received a letter from someone calling himself Bill Thomas Killman, taking credit for a previously unsolved 1986 murder and including the victim's stolen driver's license and crime scene photos. BTK was back, and for the rest of 2004, he flooded Wichita with taunting packages. In February 2005, Rader mailed a purple floppy disk to Wichita's KSAS-TV. Officer Randy Stone recovered a deleted Microsoft Word file from the disk. Buried in the metadata were 2 details Rader never thought to check. The document had last been modified by a user named Dennis, and it belonged to an organization called Christ Lutheran Church. Detectives drove past his house in Park City and spotted a black Jeep Cherokee matching one caught on security footage. To confirm it, investigators secretly pulled a tissue sample from his daughter's medical records and matched her DNA to genetic evidence recovered from a 1986 crime scene, confirming the family link without Rader ever knowing he'd been found. On February 25, 2005, police pulled Rader over as he drove home for lunch near his own house. The arrest was quiet, almost anticlimactic for a man who had haunted an entire city for 3 decades.
Oklahoma police are now searching for more of the BTK killer's hidden trophies. Dennis Rader took personal items, including jewelry and clothing, from his victims as trophies.
Investigators named serial killer Dennis Rader, also known as BTK, as the #1 suspect in an Oklahoma missing persons case from the 1970s, 18 years after he was arrested.
What made it so unbelievable was who Dennis Rader actually was. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was the president of his church council, a Cub Scout troop leader, a married father of 2, the man who measured overgrown lawns and cited neighbors for code violations. He had spent 31 years as one of the most ordinary men in his own community, while secretly living a second life as one of America's most infamous serial killers. In June 2005, Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder, describing his victims in the courtroom with unsettling detachment, referring to them as projects and his hunt for them as trolling. He was sentenced that August to 10 consecutive life terms, at least 175 years, since Kansas had no death penalty in effect during the years he killed. A man undone not by a slip of the knife, but by a slip of a computer file, after 31 years hiding behind a badge of ordinary respectability. They didn't get away with anything. They waited. 5 cases, 5 decades of murder. And in every single one of them, the same quiet, uncomfortable fact. Terry Rasmussen didn't need to hide his name. He already had 6 of them, sitting in a prison file, waiting for someone to connect the dots. Joseph DeAngelo didn't need to evade the police. He was the police. Randy McAllister didn't need to run. He drove 2 hours from a murder scene and stayed there for 41 years. Gene Stuller didn't need a new identity. He just needed his neighbors to keep calling him a nice guy. And Dennis Rader didn't need to disappear. He needed a church council seat, a scout troop, and a badge of ordinary respectability. None of them ran. None of them hid. They just waited for science to catch up to them. And in every case, it did. Eventually. But 2 of these cases aren't finished. Gene Stuller and Randy McAllister are both awaiting trial. Both, under the law, presumed innocent. Both cases will be decided in a courtroom, not in this video. Rhea Rasmussen finally has her name back. Her mother, Pepper Reed, still doesn't have hers. These men didn't get away with anything. They waited. And so, it turns out, did the truth. Drop a comment. Which of these 5 cases is the one you can't stop thinking about? We read every single one. Subscribe to Darkest Crimes. New case files every week.